Thank you, everybody, for being here with us today. I am Michelle Morris from Consolidated Planning Group. We have a very informational, important webinar for you today. Miss Nehtra Davis Moore is here with us, and she's going to be going over how to access those long-term services to help support employment and support your loved ones, in their daily life. So we do have a large crowd today. A few notes I want to share before we get started. The first thing is that since we're in webinar mode, we cannot hear you or see you, but we welcome your thoughts and questions. Please just put them in the chat box, and we can monitor the chat box as we present the information and be able to get your answers. The other thing I want to let you know is that we do record all of our webinars. You will receive an email later on today with a link to the recording, and you will also receive the slides. So no worries if you need to leave or anything like that. We will email those to you later on today. So Consolidated Planning Group, who are we and why do we host these webinars all the time? We are first and foremost a financial planning firm. We are located just outside of Houston, but we serve families all across the United States. And almost every single client that we have has an individual in their life with some kind of different need, whether it be an intellectual or developmental diagnosis or disability. We've been doing this for over 30 years, working in financial services. We sell life insurance. We want to be your one-stop holistic shop for everything financial and special needs planning related. We are members of the Special Needs Planning Academy. We are National Social Security Advisors, and we are chartered special needs consultants. So we take this very, very seriously. And, out of the entire United States, there are over 263,000 financial advisors. But out of those 263,000, fewer than 200 focus on special needs planning. Not 200,000, just 200 financial advisors in the whole United States who focus on things like protection plans for your family, lifetime care planning, transition planning. We help families with ABLE accounts and understanding how the money needs to flow between the ABLE and the special needs trust and the bank account. And we're here to advocate for you and to educate you. That 200 or fewer than 200 out of 263,000 financial advisors, that equates to fewer than 0.1% of all the financial advisors in the United States that truly understand the nuances of special needs planning. So when you're talking with Consolidated Planning Group, you are truly working with an expert in the field. And we take that very seriously. We're very proud of it. So planning early is really going to give you the clarity and the peace of mind of knowing that your loved one is going to be taken care of. And we want you to think about these things early, which is why we do all of these webinars, is to help give you ideas and solutions to what is keeping you up at night. So start planning as soon as possible. That way you're going to have the longest runway to make small incremental changes that are going to make a big impact on your family. Think about what's going to happen after high school. You don't necessarily want your loved one to graduate to sitting on the couch playing video games. So what comes next? There are wonderful opportunities out there in terms of education, vocational training, and even residential communities. So check into those things early, get on any waiting lists, and go ahead and tour those programs to see if it's going to be a good fit for your family. We also always caution families just to be very careful if you think that a sibling is going to be able or willing to step in and support your loved one in the future. Because what we have seen is that it can create some tension, some feelings of resentment and obligation, maybe on one side, but also for your individual with different needs. Here you have their maybe their sister who's been their partner in crime and they've had a relationship as best friends all these years. And now you want that sibling to step into the role of caregiver. That can feel a little irritating, I would think, that all of a sudden you're trying to be mom and you're not mom. So just be careful on both sides of that equation. So I want to introduce to you Nehtra Davis Moore. She is with the Texas Workforce Commission Vocational Rehab Program. She's going to be talking about accessing those long-term services and supports, and she will be able to answer your questions. So we appreciate you so much for being here today, Nehtra, and answering questions. And for everybody who's here to watch, thank you all for being here, and I will let you take over.
Thank you. Let's see if our slides are going to cooperate with me.
Yes, it
Okay.
looks
It
like
looks
they
like,
definitely are. Perfect.
okay. I'm getting a mouse happy there.
I do
Hello.
that sometimes too.
Hello, everyone. I am Nehtra Davis Moore. I am a program specialist with vocational rehab. My specialty area is Social Security benefits. But I do happen to know a bit about the long-term services world here in the state of Texas. And just noting that some people are out of state, I do want to just make a note about our long-term supports and services. Yes, they're available, in every state, but they're not going to be all the same in every state. Typically, the long-term services and supports are often Medicaid funded. And so, with that being said, um, if you've seen one Medicaid program in one state, you've seen just that Medicaid program. So that's why I just wanted to mention that so everything that I'll be discussing today in relation to long-term supports and services are focused here in Texas. Um, you will have other features. Long-term services and support exist in every state, but every state is going to operate them and administer them differently because of how it differs with their Medicaid. Um, so just for example, I saw somebody was in Richmond, Virginia, for example. So I don't want you to think that it's going to be carbon copy here as it is in Texas, as it is in Virginia. Just want to put that note out there. Um, so what are long-term services and supports? Well, really and truly, it's in the title. It's a broad range of paid and unpaid medical and personal care services. And it really does open the door for those who have a wide range of needs on a long-term basis. It can range from, like I said, attendant care, or it could even be in relation to maybe someone needs help on the employment range of things. So, for example, since I'm with vocational rehab is known for employment. We at vocational rehab will look to, after vocational rehab is, getting towards the end of the road of vocational rehab, we will look towards our long-term services and supports resources to provide extended supports, because ultimately it does need to be like noted and made very clear. There's a big difference between vocational rehabilitation and, for example, our Medicaid waivers, extended supports. Medicaid waiver world is our for the long haul, long-term end. Our vocational rehab end of things is not a long-term service. So just please notate that there is a big difference, because I know a lot of families it can get confused with, well, what does vocational rehab do and what is it for? And vocational rehab itself, and just in a very easy nutshell, is not a long-term service and support system. So that is one thing that I hope I hope you take that and absorb it, because it's the way the funding is designed and how things are systematically set up. Um, I see a few questions in there about,
I'm answering questions
okay.
as they come up. So, but when you go back to control the slides again, you're going to have to probably click on it again. Yeah.
Oh, I went too fast again. Gently.
Perfect.
Okay, so our extended services, are ongoing support services and other appropriate services that really are needed to help someone be stable in employment. So when we in VR world hear extended supports, we are thinking what extended supports or resources for extended supports are out there in relation to help someone sustain their employment. And so that's what we're looking for when we think of extended supports in the world of VR and how it meets long-term services and supports. Extended services are in relation to employment support on a long-term basis. Okay. VR does not have itself in a nutshell, just the way VR is designed, the ability to maintain extended services. So that's why we do have to partner, for example, with our Medicaid waivers, with employment networks, for example. We do have to have a relationship among other resources to help facilitate extended services. Now, extended services are very hard to come by in some cases. And the reason for that, it does stem from when we think about long-term supports and services, right? If there's a waiver involved, we know there's a straight door to extended services when there's a Medicaid waiver involved. When there's not a Medicaid waiver involved, that's when things can get a little tricky and hairy, especially in the realm of funding, because as we know, extended services itself, if you don't have a Medicaid waiver, things can get very expensive outside of not having a
Oh,
waiver.
yeah.
They can get very expensive, especially in relation to job coaching. So what are some examples of extended services? So job coaching, assistance with your soft and hard skills. There might be some transportation needs to get to and from work. There might be some need for help with Social Security benefits, such as reporting and maintaining, documentation in relation to getting documentation to Social Security, et cetera, or just dealing with Social Security in general. But it could also include like um, getting dressed and ready for work. It could be that assistant care that's needed while someone's at work, or it could also be helping someone manage, for example, their work schedule, making sure they know when they need to be to work. So extended services, they're going to range, and it's going to depend, right, on what a person ultimately needs. But when you're thinking extended services, you're thinking long term. Okay.
So
Extended services and long term. Uh-huh.
speaking of long term, there's been some question in the chat box of ages that are going to be served. And if my child is, been working with the Workforce Commission and they're 21, are they going to get dumped or what's going to happen?
We're gonna go through that as we
Okay,
get through the slides. We'll get to
thank
that.
you.
Um, and again, so remember I said it's going to vary, right, from person to person based on need. So a lot of times we're going to say, well, how do we identify like if extended supports are needed, right? Um, a lot of times it's going to depend on what a person and how a person has gone through their vocational rehab journey. And that's why it's a big deal when we know that a waiver, for example, is involved and in the mix. It is so crucial for the vocational rehab team, our VR counselor, if there's any other program specialist that might be involved along the way. Maybe there's, an OIB specialist. There might be a number of specialists within the realm of VR that has, been involved in a person's journey. Maybe it's a transition counselor, for example, but there might be more than just the VR counselor from the VR end. And then as we move forward and we figure out, oh, there's a Medicaid waiver involved, there's a service coordinator somewhere or a case manager, and there's also a waiver provider. And all those people have insight on what supports an individual may need to be successful in moving forward through their employment journey. Okay. So again, that could range from maybe they need that reminder day to day to remember to clock in. That could be the only thing a person needs. Um, but if they don't have that reminder to clock in every time it's time for them to go to work, for example, then we know if they don't remember to clock in, what happens? Then you're not working, you're not getting paid. So it could be something as simple as that, like, oh, we need a job coach to be there, maybe 5 minutes before Johnny is supposed to clock in to remind him to clock in, for example. And as simple as that sounds, it could make or break, a sustainable job, like a job for someone. So
Yeah.
and if that's needed on a long-term basis, right, that is something to consider. I know it sounds very simple, but you will be surprised how some of the simplest of tasks can get lost in translation, especially for some of the population that we work with. And it could be just as simple as they see they see Miss Bonnie Sue is there, and that's the reminder that Miss Bonnie Sue is here. It is time for me to clock in. As simple as that when it comes to job coaching. Now, but it could range from that, or it could be more intense to where a job coach is needed on the job for someone for their entire shift. But that is what ultimately the team coming together and having a very detailed meeting about what supports a person needs is so important. And there are often times where those disconnects happen, where from the VR end, we may not know that a waiver is involved. And it's important for you guys as family, please share that information. And you may not know. And we're trying to work with our VRCs, our counselors on the VR end to know some of the right questions to ask that may prompt you to say, oh, yes, no, we do have someone that checks in with us once a month to talk about their waiver services and what supports they're needed. And usually that will prompt you to have that conversation. Oh, I need to tell the vocational rehab counselor that we do have an extended service possibility. Okay. So just know that it might not always translate and just come up, but maybe with the right discussion and conversations had, that it will. So it is absolutely okay to share that type of information with the vocational rehab counselor because they may not know that you've got other entities involved. So please share that. Um, I okay, there we go. Oh, so here we go. That leads me into some of the questions that are helpful to ask, right? So paying for extended support providers, right? A waiver is going to be the best source, right? But we know that the waiver interest list is very long for some of the waivers. So there is a big worry, I know, for a lot of you on, well, how do I get my child on a waiver? Really and truly, and Michelle said it right at the beginning, early planning is best. And I often tell families, um, if your pediatrician has ever told you about a local authority and interest list, they are a very good pediatrician because I think that's where it starts. If in a perfect world, it would start with literally at our childhood provider, our medical provider in our schools, of
Yeah,
course.
as
It
soon as
would
there's any indication
sign,
of a
yes,
medical issue or some issue, you should get on that list if
interest.
possible.
Yes, I agree. Thank you, Michelle.
Mm.
Um, but these are some helpful questions that we share with some of our VRCs to ask. And kind of the questions I've kind of touched on already. Does someone come to your house to help you? Do you have a service coordinator or a case manager? Does someone call in and check on you once a month? Do you have Medicaid, Medicare? Do you have any Social Security disability benefits like SSI? Maybe you get a benefit from a parent. Does your parent receive SSDI themselves and you get a benefit from them? What is your disability? Do you know when it began? So some of these questions can kind of help guide that conversation with vocational rehab. And again, like I said, for my family's parents out there, it's definitely okay to answer these questions. And you don't have to feel like, oh my goodness, if I answer these questions with VR, Social Security is going to come at us and they're going to, make our benefits all wackadoodle, right? Sharing information with VR is for the customer that is coming to us, for help. It's not for Social Security purposes. It's to help the customer sustain and help reach their goal in relation to employment. So just wanted to kind of give that little peace of mind there. So how do we identify non-paid and maybe some natural extended supports? Oftentimes, it's pretty easy to identify that because you might have someone on, at the workplace where maybe supervisors or coworkers are helping support, other employees that might need some more guidance. And so those are some of those non-paid and just kind of it's naturally happening on the job supports that um, they would fall into that extended services realm, but it's not necessarily that it's being it paid for or it's attached to a waiver, for example. It's something that's just kind of naturally happening. Now, in relation to that and why it's important to pay attention to those things, especially if someone is on one of the Social Security disability programs, paying attention to those non-paid and natural supports, there might be a way to put a dollar amount on that help and maybe get what's known as a work incentive. And we've talked about that in previous sessions, but it is important to kind of pay attention to non-paid and natural extended supports that are happening on the job because for, like I said, it could open the door for possible work incentives that can be requested from Social Security, and that would in turn just help on a person's cash benefit. Um, as far as who can you use for non-paid natural extended supports, it really can end up being anyone. A lot of times we will see it might default, like Michelle said, and remember, careful consideration, right? Because it could be like a sibling who steps up to the plate and is saying, okay, I can take on this role. But also knowing it's a big responsibility to take on those roles, especially from the caregiver end. Caregiving, especially for the parents that are on, that it can be very, very hard, very taxing, very tiring. And at some point, relief is going to be needed in some form or fashion. So that early planning, that ongoing planning, that long-term service discussion planning, it's sometimes a very tough conversation to have with families, but I can tell you, especially for any professionals who are on, it is an important conversation to have. And for my parents that are on, yes, it's a tough conversation to have, but I always tell my parents when we do have that conversation, I'd rather you have the conversation when you're here versus it trying to get sorted out when you're not here. So just keep that in mind. So who can provide some of these the LTSS long-term services and our extended services that we're talking about? So you've heard me mention Medicaid waivers a lot. That is a like huge put it in lights waivers. We love
Well,
Medicaid
while
waivers.
since you're talking about that, I'm gonna
Yeah.
put there we go. I've got control of the screen again. I'm gonna put the
Yeah.
website that you can go to,
Mhm.
yourtexasbenefits.com. You're going to create an account in your child's name and make sure they have the account, and then you can look on there under manage and get your child on those waiting lists, or you can call your local authority. yourtexasbenefits.com is a great place to start to find out more about those waiver programs. All right, go ahead.
Absolutely. So the first one, obviously, we have on that list is our Medicaid waivers. We do have some Medicaid state plan benefits and block grants. We have our Aging and Disability Resource Centers, our ADRCs, our local authorities, our local mental health authorities, our local IDD authorities. We have our Ticket to Work employment networks. Um, Private job coaching, I mentioned that earlier. And then, of course, technology is advancing. So don't rule out technology because it is just moving right on forward. And you might see that there's some extended services, LTSS capabilities through different phone applications or software. So, like I
Mhm.
mentioned, for example, maybe, you know, Bobby is so used to seeing Miss Bonnie Sue, like I said, to remind him to clock in. But maybe if we have a picture of Miss Bonnie Sue and a reminder that literally voices on, Bobby's phone that says clock in, maybe that can be, that extended support service. And we don't maybe need a physical Bonnie Sue there, for example. But we also have VR extended services for youth, and that's for those who are under age 25. So it works a little bit differently for our younger population. For those who are over, that's when we really want to start seeing and looking at if there's a waiver, if they have a waiver slot, if they're active on a waiver, and if not, we could examine and start interviewing what's known as the employment networks to see if there's employment networks out there who might have some resources that might be a good fit for a person who may need some extended supports. Okay, so you keep hearing me talk about waivers. What are waivers? Well, Medicaid waivers provide a huge menu, and I say a variety, and I like to say menu and a package of services because it is like a menu of services, an array of services for people. They can be in home or they can be in their community settings. And what the waivers do, they literally waive the cost of what it would take for someone to be in an institutional setting, but those waivers waive the cost of what it would take because institutional care is very expensive. But that care can be, and that cost can be waived to provide those same supports that they would get in an institutional setting in a community setting. So that's essentially what we see when we're talking about home and community-based services waiver. So when you hear home and community-based services waiver, it's waiving the cost of care that it would cost to be in a institutional setting, but to get that same care in a community setting. Okay, so it does help states reduce costs and expand coverage and services and improve care for certain target populations because each of the waivers are for a certain target population. Okay, so all of the waivers are not the same. That's one thing to note. So here's one of our, or two of our most popular ones, I guess you could say. And these are for our folks who have ID or IDD. So our first one, and one of the most popular ones, is HCS, the Home and Community Services. HCS is very popular, and some of you have probably heard of HCS waiver before. And the other one is Texas Home Living, which is not as robust as HCS, but it does operate very similar to HCS. And this is where you would see one who might be in an ICF or IDD facility, maybe like a state supported living center, for example. You you would see HCS kind of come about when a slot is available for those population target groups. Okay. Any questions about HCS? Hopefully, it sounds familiar to you guys that you've heard it before. If not, it's good to start hearing, what the names of these waivers are so you know what interest lists to get your family members on. And like Michelle said earlier, the sooner, the better.
Mhm.
So we have two other ones for developmental disabilities. The first one is class, and that's community living assistance that supports and services. Class, I have seen a wide range of individuals who can be on the class waiver. I've seen folks who may have an IDD diagnosis to those who might be like an administrative law judge and have a PhD, for example. I've seen a wide variety of folks who might have a class waiver. The other one is deaf, blind, and multiple disabilities, known as DBMD. And this again waives off that ICF or IDD intermediate care. So the four that we've gone over so far: HCS, Texas Home Living, Class, and DBMD. So just to kind of get you familiar with the names of the waivers, I know it sounds like it might be a little simple, but for some folks, you may not have never heard of the Medicaid waivers. So just wanted to give you some of that language and lingo. As far as medical necessity, okay, there are waivers that do, capture that population of those who might need a nursing home level of care, nursing facility level of care. And those waivers, we've got our medically dependent children's program. It used to be known as MDCP. Now it's known as Star Kids. And that is from ages 0, so infant, to 21. And then we have our Star Plus Plus waiver, okay, for ages 21 and up. So I think there was a question about, well, what happens, for someone who's over 21, right? And if they have a significant medical need, maybe they need some attendant care, for example, um, that Star Plus waiver, it's a good one. It is a good one. And I will tell you, for the Star Plus Plus waiver, the interest list for that one is not as long as all of the other interest list. Okay. And really the reason for that one is it's not as robust. It's operated by managed care organizations, and it hasn't been around as long as the other ones. So it's a newer one. Okay, so what about those who might have some mental health needs going on or serious emotional disturbances? The YES waiver, youth empowerment services, are for those who are ages 3 up to age 19. Now, the YES waiver is operated by our local mental health authorities. Okay, so that is different. That is one waiver that is so much different from the other waivers, because all the other ones you can go through the local authority as the gateway. Okay, so our local authority here, for example, I'm near the greater Austin area. It would be Austin Travis County Integral Care. So the local authorities that are in your area, who feed your county area, that's a good place to know as well. For Region 5, which is, greater Houston area, for example, it would be the Harris Center, which is a pretty big local authority. And so for those of you who are in the greater Houston area, Harris Center might sound familiar to you. Texana is another one. I'm trying to think. Life Path. There's different ones, and I believe there's 28 or 29 across the state of Texas. But the local mental health authority is the one who operates and administers and keeps the interest list for the YES waiver. Now, we have the home and community-based services for adult mental health. It's not technically a waiver, but it does operate and function much like one. But it is not a waiver. But the way it operates is very similar to it. Now, when it comes to when you'll see these waivers, or these two populations that are served, it's typically in relation to a severe mental illness. Okay, so when we see a YES waiver, that is for youth who are having some serious emotional disturbances. And that YES waiver might open the door for that age youth that is between ages 3 and up to 19. And then if there's adults outside of that, so anybody over 19, right? And we might need to look at and ask that local mental health authority about the HCBS adult mental health. Okay. Um, And a lot of people don't know about that. So I just want, there's there's resources there. They're not always the easiest to access and know about. So it's important to just kind of know some of the lingo and be able to approach the right entity to ask the right questions. Um, Thank you, Carolyn. 39. Goodness,
39
39.
widows.
So here are our numbers. And this is not in months, not in days. This is years. This is the time, the length of our interest list and time it can take for slots to open. So for HCS, we're about up to 17 years. Class, 17. Texas Home Living, 15. DBMD, 6. The Star Plus Plus one that I mentioned, it's shorter, it's 3. And our Star Kids and MDCP is 2, and Yes is 1. So you can see those first two, right? And those are the most robust ones, I will tell you. So you can see those interest lists are definitely much longer. A lot of people have asked, well, why are they so long? Why is this is crazy? Why would it take almost 17 years for someone to be able to get a waiver slot? It takes legislation to get slots. And so that is what we're up against. Um, and I know looking at that list, you're like, oh, this is why Michelle and Nitra said the earlier, the better. And this is why Nitra said, when I hear a pediatrician from the jump talk about interest lists, when they might feel something is going on and they share that with a family concerning their child, as soon as possible, that's why. That's
Yes,
why I'm like,
absolutely.
that's a good pediatrician. That is a
And
good
so
pediatrician.
I mentioned that we host webinars all the time. We have entire webinars about the waiver programs and which is which and what they mean and which ones you need to have a IDD diagnosis and what you need this for and what you need that for. So please feel free to check out more of our webinars. I want to get through Nitra's slides today though.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So here are some of what waiver services can cover. This is not just a full list, but some of the bigger ones that things can be covered. Pre-vocational employment readiness, employment services. We've got employment assistance through the waivers. We've got waiver supported employment, personal attendance services, adaptive aids, minor home modifications, behavior support, transportation. There might be some OT or PT. And the individual skills and socialization is what most of you may have known as rehabilitation. So here is just a bit on our Medicaid state plan or benefit block grants, like what programs fall under there. Our community first choice, primarily our pass herb services. We have our community care eligibility programs, and that used to fall under what used to be known as CCAD, but basically attendant care. But it does cover some day programming, case management, and it offers some very minimal employment services, just not as, again, robust as the waivers. But they might be able to help with that attendant care, for example, while someone's on the job. And then I have mentioned already that HCBS adult mental health, again, it's a similar service array to the waivers, but it's not a waiver. So, what is Community First Choice, the personal attendant services? Well, provided it's a hand-on assistance, really for supervision or cueing. This could include, so for example, remember I said, oh, I need to get dressed and I need help getting dressed to go to work or to start my day. You might need that community first choice personal assistant services. They can also help with household chores or escort services. So maybe you need not the transportation piece, but maybe you need assistance while you're there at a doctor's appointment and you need help while you're at your doctor's appointment. Not the transport place, but you have an escort with you while you're at your doctor's appointment, for example. Um, Community first choice habilitation. This helps customers acquire, maintain, and enhance skills to accomplish some of those ADLs and any health related task, right? So this could be using an adaptive equipment, making, maybe you need help making decisions on, yes, I would like my flu shot today. You know, maybe it could be some of those just personal decision choices that you might need guidance and help with to be able to communicate with the provider to make sure you're getting ultimately the service that you want and need, right? Self-administer medication. Maybe you need somebody to help you remind to take your medications every day. Socialization, that's another big piece. But it may also include components of that personal assistance services, such as the personal hygiene, household tasks, maybe moving around, and money management, which is another thing. So, what are our community care services? These provide services such as the personal assistance services that we talked about. But the community care services eligibility programs, they're funded by Medicaid or block grants, and those are administered by HHSC. Okay, so it works a little bit different in that sense. And there's different programs that fall up under there, especially that adult foster care one that often gets overlooked. And we also have SIMPASS. SIMPASS is a attendant care service where someone has a copayment because they earn too much, for example, but it would be at a reduced cost. But please note that SIMPASS is only available in certain counties. And I believe that this will be shared. So these links are hyperlinked.
Mhm.
You're more than welcome to click on them, and it will take you to the information about those stuff. This is that adult mental health waiver that I mentioned earlier, the one that is not a waiver, but operates much like a waiver. So this is just some more details about that. So you can see some of the services that include residential services, transportation, adaptive aids, psychiatric supports, peer support, respite, substance use disorder services, nursing, and recovery management. So it's again not a waiver, but operates like one. And to get information about that, you want to go through our local mental health authorities. Okay, so what are our ICFs? Our ICFs and IDD institutional type settings. Okay, sometimes we have smaller ICFs that are in the community, but some of the bigger ICF facilities that you'll probably be more familiar with here in Texas are state supported living centers. And everything, when you think about ICFs, the difference that ICFs is everything is inclusive and included in kind of one lump sum full array of care. So ICF really does encompass all support needs that an individual will need. So it's an institutional setting. So that's why it's not like a waiver. ICFs and waivers are totally different, night and day, the way they operate. Nursing facilities, probably pretty familiar.
ICF,
Institution
I'm sorry, let's go back 1 second. ICF stands for Intermediate Care
care
Facilities.
facilities. Yes, not
Perfect.
nursing homes. So nursing homes and ICFs are different. They might look similar, but they are definitely different. The nursing facilities are institutional care whose medical condition regularly requires the skills of licensed nurses. Okay. And they're available to individuals who are Medicaid recipients, or there might be folks who are doing private pay for nursing care. So nursing facilities must provide needs based on like room and board, right? Social services, the over-counter medications, medical supplies and equipments, and personal needs items. But if a person on Medicaid lives in a nursing facility and goes to work, this is one thing we wanted to note, and that's why it's in here. All of their earnings go toward their cost of care. So a lot of times people, and I shouldn't say a lot of times, it very rarely happens, but I do get questions from nursing facilities and they want to know, well, such and such wants to go to work. what does that look like? How does that go? I mean, they can. It's not saying that they can't, but all of the way the funding stream and how the process is designed, because that institutional care, remember, is so expensive, their earnings are going to go towards that cost of care. That's how that's designed when it comes to nursing facilities and employment. Oop, too fast. Our Aging and Disability Resource Center, our ADRCs, are a part of the No Wrong Door system. And this was designed to streamline public access to long-term services, care, and programs. They are a key point of success for a person. And they do have that background, of course, for our LTSS specialized information. They do have a referral and assistance, program, if you will, at the ADRCs. And it was designed really to help create like a one-stop shop access to information for people who are needing information on long-term services and care. So if you have a question about, for example, one of the waivers or nursing facilities, just long-term services, just in general, the ADRCs are there as that one-stop shop to be able to reach out to and just give some general information on how to get things started. So you've heard me mention our local authorities. I've known it as local authority for so long, but the long title is Local Intellectual and Developmental Disability Authority, also known as LIDA. So LIDAs are our gateways, really and truly, to our Medicaid waivers. They really and truly are. They're the gateway. They provide an array of services for folks. They do also have, each of the local authorities have what's known as general revenue. Now, when it comes to their general revenue, the local authority decides how to allocate and what services they would like to use their general revenue for. So it's not going to be the same from one local authority to another. Some local authorities may use it, for example, to provide extended services if they see that that's a need in their, their catchment area. But some might use it, for example, to help those attain citizenship, for example. It depends on the local authority on how they utilize their general revenue funds. Okay. But this is where you're going to see service coordination, behavior supports. This is where really and truly the local authority and vocational rehab, we need to be best friends, and sometimes we don't know each other are involved, and we need to be involved with each other. So if there's someone that you're working with at the local authority and you happen to be working with the VR, please let either entity know that they're involved, because they do need to eventually touch base with each other. The local mental health authority or behavioral health authorities. This is, for example, the one waiver that I said, that yes waiver, and the adult mental health one that's not like a waiver. That is where they're going to be housed, and that's where you would funnel to for behavior and mental health services.
1 second, does the LIDA provide more than what you get through the Medicaid waiver services, or the LIDA provides the Medicaid? How does that?
So the LIDA is the gateway. So you could approach, for example, the LIDA to, for example, get on the interest list. Let's say that a slot comes up, that LIDA is going to reach out to you and say, hey, are you still interested in this waiver? You're going to absolutely say yes. And you're going to then reach back so you can get things going. So basically, that LIDA is the operator and facilitator to facilitate the actual waiver services getting started. And then what's going to happen, you'll have what's known as a service coordinator who's employed with that LIDA. Does that help kind of break
Yes,
that down
thank
just a
you.
bit? Okay, Ticket to Work, our employment networks, they can continue to provide some extended supports. Please note that there are some public and private companies who are employment networks. There's over 100 employment networks serving Texas. Some can be in state or out of state. Some are Texas Workforce Solution offices, are ENs. Please, it's okay when you're trying to see if an AN fits your needs. It's okay to be picky and see if an AN fits your needs or not, because not all employment networks offer the same thing. So It's okay to ask questions on what maybe that Ian specialty is, for example. Private job coaching. Private job coaching is available. You can find private job coaching through different public agencies, nonprofits. There might be some advocacy groups out there. Um, but the job accommodation networks, they do provide job coaching resources, and you can click on that link to find a variety. But really and truly, how you find private job, coaching resources, word of mouth, get online, talk to each other, parent groups such as this, consolidated planning group. It's really about connecting resources to one another, especially in that private realm. Remember, we did talk about how technology is, we have seen technology in the world of disabilities. It's some stuff that is out there is amazing. So don't rule technology out. Extended services for youth. Okay, so when it comes to VR and extended services for youth, for those who are 25 and under, okay, that is when you will see extended services that have to be provided from the VR end, but the VR can only provide those extended services when it's documented that no other resource is available. So, for example, if there's a waiver, right? If there is a waiver, we've got to go through the waiver to provide those extended services and not VR. Because really and truly, that's what waivers were designed for. And remember, I said when I first started that VR is not it wasn't designed to be long term. Our long-term services end, that's where we're going to start hearing our waiver. Okay. So if you would like to contact VR, there's some hyperlinks here. There's a QR code where you can do Start My VR to just get some basic demographic information. And then one of the local offices will reach out to you. But there's also a VR lookup for, offices if you're having issues trying to find a VR office or information. So here is just a basic resource, some links. It gives you an HSSC long-term comparison chart of the different waivers. Um, we've got our sequencing of services chart, and that sequencing of services chart is really to show how vocational rehab and the waivers, the process of that, how that interaction works. So please feel free to use those resources. Here are some of the program descriptions of the different waivers. So you see HCS, Texas Home Living. I saw there was a question about what is Texas Home Living. You can click this, a PDF will come up to just detail out the program descriptions and the differences between them. And if you ever have a question about any policy related to any of the waivers, here are the waiver policy mailboxes. And you can literally send a question to one of those, the respective one, and they can answer a question.
All
Okay,
right.
we've
So
got,
yeah, what I'm gonna do is ask you, do you want to talk about these amendments or not?
I mean, I just put it in there. It's just a federal law requiring like public documents. It's describing, they must, we must clearly state,
These
the
are your
percentage of
disclosures,
costs.
basically.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So let's
It's
get
just,
to
it's
some
just
of the,
basically say where the money's going.
yeah, I want to get to some of the questions in the chat box.
Yeah.
You will all receive these slides, and I encourage you to go through and click all of the slides, all of the links. Contact Nehtra with questions. Also, you can contact Consolidated Planning Group with questions that aren't related to this specific topic. One that I've seen a couple of times, Paul, is from Paula. When my son turns 25 in November, so
Uh-huh.
he's been like trying to get in with VR and can't get in because there's no resources or there's no services being provided. So then
Okay.
what happens? They just drop him.
I I'm not sure. I'd have to know more about the VR case to know what's going on. But ultimately, when we think of VR, it's going to always circle back to employment. Can this person be employed? So when you think VR, it's always going to circle back to what is the employment need to get a person employed, and is VR the proper entity for that? Does that make
Perfect.
sense?
Yes, yes. So if you're trying to get employment services, well, yeah, they said that's what they want is employment
Okay.
services, but he's turning 25. So what do they do?
So if he's turning 25 and if he's still involved with VR, no, he's not just going to get on, he shouldn't get automatically dropped unless there's something going on with the vocational skill at that point in time to where maybe VR is not the appropriate entity where he can be employed and he might need other supports to gain employment readiness.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah.
where you could, for example, reach out to different resources such as our local authorities, for example, to see if they might have some resources to for that employment readiness realm of things.
Okay, very good. So I just wanted to let everybody know, I'm not going to go through these slides too much. This is kind of a list of things to keep on your planning radar and the things that we at Consolidated Planning Group can help you with. This link will take you to our upcoming webinars so that you can pre-register. Everyone who registers gets the email afterwards that has the link to the webinar recording, and you should be able to receive all the slides. And then this is how you contact Consolidated Planning Group for a free Zoom consultation. So if you have any questions for me, you can use the QR code, you can call or email, or I've placed my own email and phone number in the chat box. You can reach out to me directly to get that scheduled. So I think Sophia had a question that I could help with. I think that Bob has some questions. Paula, anybody, if you have a question that did not get answered or anything that we can help you with, please reach out to either myself or Nehtra. Her contact info is in the slides as well. I did see one other question I wanted to get to you.
Uh-huh.
Was there a complaint process for the Workforce Commission? Like if people have signed up and they're just not getting anywhere, or there's such high turnover and
Mhm.
then they have to start over with each counselor, what do they do? That the mailboxes you've mentioned, the policy ones, or what?
That's through HHSC, but yes, Texas VR, yes, there is a complaint process. Typically for the complaint process, it's good to start within the, I guess you could say like chain of command type of deal, if you will. But so if you know the unit that you're having issues in, of course you want to start best you can with the vocational rehab counselor. If you're not getting, resolution, there, then you need to move on to the VR supervisor. If you're not getting resolution from the VR supervisor, there's a VR manager, and it keeps going up. Um, but if you're having like, I guess, major issues, there are advocates like within VR. But if you, and really and truly, you can even, message me and I can try to help and navigate too. Um, but if you're talking like there is a formal complaint process, but you would obviously have to be within VR, like to go that route, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
Okay. Um, So one of the questions, I've got two questions, and then I see
Mhm.
more messages popping up. But what about citizenship? Are the waiver programs available for people who are on a green card or visas, or they must have a social security number? How does that work?
So, I think those are things that addressed once somebody, like anybody can get technically on the interest list, but when it comes time for the slot to open, I believe all of that is looked at. And I
Okay.
can't speak directly to it. That's, more of a HHSC question. Because I don't, or even maybe the local authorities are able to, break that down better because I don't know, but I believe that they look at all that demographic type of information once the actual slot comes up.
Okay. And the last question that I saw, I think is pretty easy to answer. They were saying they signed their 18-year-old up on the Star Plus Plus. Well, you
Okay.
have to be 21 years old. And even if the waiver might not come around for 3 or 4 years, you've got to wait, right, to sign up for that one. Is that right,
Um,
Nitra?
but they're 18, they said,
Hmm.
and they're already on an interest list or no?
They put their 18-year-old on the Star Plus waiver interest list, and they were removed from that list
Because they're not of age.
because they're
Yeah.
not of age. Yes. So, today's webinar has been extremely helpful and lots of great information and links and all of that. Everybody here is going to receive the slides, the link to the recording. Please, if we didn't have time to get to your question, I see one person wants to hear success stories. There are a ton of success stories about the workforce programs, but we just don't, we're already a minute over, so we've got to wrap it up for today. Please reach out to me or Nitra or your local authority, your LIDA, or your local VR programs and discuss with them and discuss with us, and we are happy to help you as much as we possibly can. So I want to thank everybody, especially you, Nitra, for being here with us today and sharing all this great information. And everybody who was viewing the webinar, thank you. If you happen to be not if you happen to be viewing this webinar on our YouTube channel or through our podcast, and you want a copy of these slides, all you need to do is email us. That email address would be contact@cpgcares.net, and we're happy to get you these slides, or you can ask us questions. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a great, great day, and we'll talk soon.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.